Alright, hello and welcome to the English language version of the very first video that I recently posted in Japanese showing how I installed a TRUST Greddy Turbo Kit to my 2026 5-door Jimny XL, whatever they call it in your market. Here we are on the final day of work where after test runs and checking all my work, I've put everything back together and installed this turbo badge on the rear hatch, and needless to say I'm highly satisfied with the upgrade, but I did want to walk you through all the steps that it took as a Jimny owner in Tokyo, everything from ordering parts to getting them home, to pre-installation and preparation for the work and spilling fluids all over the place, and even peeking into the crankcase to see parts I've never seen before. And over the 3 or 4 days that it took me, not including the interior work with this boost/water temperature gauge which I built into the instrument cluster using a 3D printer. Probably save that for another video, this one's going to be well long enough. Why don't we start with the base vehicle itself? Amid much anticipation and fanfare, the 5-door Jimny, or the Nomad as it's called here, was released early last year, so late January 2025. And it was released in the FC trim only, which I understand is the higher trim with the heated seats and start button for ignition and key fob and other things. Again, this happens to be the updated 2nd gen version of the pamphlet, so after a significant price hike to just under 3 million yen, it is now identical for either gearbox. But back when I was considering buying this car, the starting price was in the 17,000 US dollar range, in other words, dirt cheap. So I figured I would leave a tiny deposit with the dealer and make the final call on whether or not I'd actually buy the car in the coming months or maybe close to a year. Long story short, I did, even though I was told it would be an indefinite and surely a long wait. So, fast forward 14 full months to 31 March this year, me and my shop chief went over to the Suginami dealer in Tokyo to pick up our long-awaited Nomad. And within minutes of owning the car, it was covered in dog hair. Thank you, Shiba Inu. The mileage at pickup was right around 27 kilometers. Anyway, as a first-time Jimny owner, this was very exciting, so we drove around a couple hundred kilometers, and the first thing we wanted to do was change the engine oil, as well as over those 300 kilometers or so, there was definitely a certain catch getting the gear selector lever into first and reverse, so I went with Waco's MT75 all the way around. The gearbox, both diffs, and transfer case. Looks like this. Sorry I don't have it on video. Well, that seemed to have made a significant difference. Stress-free gear shifting all the way around, so thank goodness for that. And here's me running a magnetic drain plug through the original oil to see if I'd catch any metal shavings. I didn't really. And here we are draining the gearbox. These plugs come magnetic from the factory, and I was expecting shavings, as they say any new car will. This looked like an awful lot to me, but then again, what do I know? Figured I would just change the fluid and kind of monitor that as we go. Had to scrape off this old liquid thread seal gasket stuff. That was a pain. Anyway, let's talk about ordering parts. A company here called Showa Trust under the Greddy badge offers a ton of aftermarket parts for a whole wide variety of makes and models, of which I knew they had offered a turbo kit for the Jimny for years now. So once I decided that I was actually going to buy the car, probably around January or February, I started kind of snooping around to get these things on order in case there was a long lead time. I was waiting for the car anyway. But since there isn't a huge DIY culture here with not many people having access to a garage, I don't think they were really willing to sell to an individual user like I. So long story short, I had a car retailer or parts retailer called Autobox put the orders in on my behalf. And I was told it'd be a 2-month wait time. And sure enough, 2 months later, I got the call. Everything was ready for pickup over at the Shinonome store, kind of over there by Odaiba or Toyosu area. And I was able to get everything I needed, or so I thought at the time, back to the apartment. And I didn't want to open up the boxes and get right to work and figure stuff out right there on the spot, so I figured I would kind of unbox everything and check everything out beforehand. If you have no interest in the unboxing and checking out of the parts, please just skip ahead to the actual work chapters, but otherwise, real quick, here's the turbo kit itself for the manual 5-door. $3,400, nice. And the oil pan, $220, seems ridiculous. Blow-off kit, $400, sounds kind of reasonable for some reason. Washer tank, $170, ridiculous. And the old cooler kit. The Greddy oil filter. And 4 overpriced spark plugs. I shall cover total cost at the end. Now let's get to unboxing. Starting with the biggest box, the $3,500 turbo kit. Here's an overview. You got your turbine, compressor, front mount intercooler, front pipe, pressure pipes, gasket, air cleaner, all kinds of things. Here's a turbo. Looks to be a Mitsubishi TF035. Tiny little cute guy. Comes with a vacuum actuated wastegate. There she is. This front / downpipe has got your integrated catalytic converter and oxygen sensor port, as well as your sort of main channel and wastegate bypass. These headers look amazing. Nice, fat, perfectly circular tubing all around and nice machine mating surfaces. Nice. And this elbow here has got the blow-by return. Here's the exhaust manifold gasket, and this would be your air cleaner. Otherwise, in this box are some ports for oil return, some metal brackets and tubing for the intercooler and things. Mind you, at this point I have no idea what I'm looking at. I know now, having done the work, exactly what goes where and what does what. As far as things not included that you'll definitely need are some thread sealant and some liquid gasket RTV for installation of the new oil pan, which basically gives you an oil return port from the turbine. It seems TRUST have kindly included some bedtime reading as well, and here's that oil pan we speak of. It's got the port drilled and spout welded, so if you can do this on your own and reuse your original oil pan, great. I couldn't be bothered, so now, like a fool, I own 2 oil pans for the same vehicle. I'll need to clean up these shavings before I go ahead and install. Now, blow-off valve. Here's the elbow with a dual return, one for blow-off and one for blow-by. The blow-off valve itself we'll also be looking at, and there should also be a tube, there it is, for return. This is for when you return your blown off gases back to your intake. A little bit more literature, and here's the actual blow-off valve itself. Also included are the hose clamps, zip ties, vacuum tubes, gaskets, hardware, etc. Next we have our oil cooler. Okay, the reading is getting a bit excessive now. Comes with all the stays and brackets and zip ties and the in-out tubing, as well as a sandwich block in order to pull oil out of the circuit to route up to this 12-layer oil cooler. And moving right along, we've got our overpriced aluminium box, which is our replacement for a washer tank, which helps free up space for the turbine and intake. And lastly, but not leastly, don't forget your Greddy oil filter and 4 cold plugs. They were of the NGK Iridium Heat Range 8 variety. That's what they look like up close. Okay, enough of that. I'm boring myself. Let's get on to the struggle. So I've read and reread these instructions through and through, but since I want to do my oil pan first in the shop, we're going to switch things around and start on step 2.6. So here we are, pulled into the shop, really pumped and excited for this upgrade. But as you know, there's a great deal of cumbersome work that needs to happen, like removing the grills and disconnecting lights and so forth, so here I am knocking that out. And you may have noticed this is not the 5-door Nomad grill. I personally did not like the way the original grill looked with the vertical slots and the chrome trim around it, so I switched it out to this grill almost immediately. Now this shroud's got to go, as the intercooler will go here, but it will make another appearance later on in the video. And with that, we're finally ready to get the car lifted in the air. This is such a luxury to be able to just flick a switch and get the car up at a height that's easy to work on, which is the main reason why I wanted to get the oil pan off first while I had access to the shop. Basically, I didn't want to leave the car here overnight and have to keep coming back, so the plan was to get the oil pan off and replaced and do the rest of the work at home. And just like that, with the bumper off, you should have a couple of connectors for your fog lamps, as well as this very annoying washer liquid line that kept dripping everywhere. Please be wary of your electrical connectors and make sure you protect them. It should be noted that I did not. The bumper is very easily removed, and it might help to have a handful of these extra fasteners or rivets because I have broken some in the past. Now with everything removed and the car up in the air, the car is looking like a surprised goldfish or something, but the next step would be this lower shroud. Just a few fasteners for this one, which expose some handwriting from our friends at Maruti Suzuki. Like I say, quite the aesthetic we got going on here. Now, on to draining the oil. I've only had this car a few months and this is my second time, and I'm not very good at it yet, but there are so many things underneath the drain bolt and the filter here that I tend to make a mess, so I'll definitely need to work on that. So I did replace the original drain bolt with a magnetic one the last time I did this, the first oil change I did after taking delivery of the car, so it's easier to check the metal shavings. I had changed the oil to a 5W30 in anticipation of this turbocharged upgrade, and this is what that looked like after a couple thousand kilometers. And this, of course, is the original factory 0W16. Looks very metallic and kind of gross to me. This pan didn't have a very long lifespan. That's okay. We'll be chucking that out of the way. And there are a ton of bolts to get to remove the original oil pan. Luckily, none of them are too terribly hard to get to. Just don't forget these two that are over by the clutch. And there is one hidden little Allen hex in the oil filter housing, so don't let that fool you. You just need a couple of extensions and maybe a breaker bar. You're kind of looking up the whole time. It's very tiring. Not impossible, not fun, but hey, it's got to be done. So after over an hour with the crowbar, I finally wrestled the original pan off, which exposed a bunch of cool stuff like this oil pickup tube and the tip of the oil level gauge, and I thought I might as well have a cheeky little look around, because how often do you get to look inside your crankcase? And quite frankly, I don't ever want to be back in here, at least not for anything catastrophic. So first thing I see past this baffle or girdle or whatever this is the front main bearing cap. How cool is that? And if we move over to the side and shove my iPhone through this little crevice here, you can see the inside of the piston skirt, the wrist pins, connecting rods, conrod caps, counterweights, all cool things I've only ever seen on YouTube videos and engine breakdowns. I don't know, I'm just easily fascinated by these mechanical type things. Now looking back toward the rear, you can see the main cap back here as well as the flywheel. And this car being a 5-speed manual, the clutch body will be bolted directly to the opposite side of this wheel, and obviously is operated by your foot pedal, which then pushes hydraulic fluid to the slave cylinder, which pushes a rod against a pivot, and then that pushes on a release bearing, which then pushes down on the finger springs. You know the rest. But I digress. The coolest thing I saw was this crank position sensor plate. I just hope I never have to replace it. Here's the end of the oil level gauge. It comes down through a tunnel, but I really need to stop and get back to work as I have all this old RTV that I need to remove, and I need to scrub clean these mating surfaces before I put the new oil pan on. Fast forward, I did all that. Here I am just applying a little bit of oil to the O-ring gasket on the new filter to put on this brand new oil pan that has the oil return already installed from the turbine. I just capped off the other end for now. This is somewhat wasteful because I need to put the filter on and fill the engine with oil just to drive it home a couple kilometers, only to throw that oil away because I do need to get the oil block in here. But again, I'd rather do this work here in the shop. Just thought I'd take a moment to compare these filters. One is, about 3 times the price. I don't know if I'll continue and bother with the Greddy filters or not, but anyway, after this, I did fill oil, warm up the engine, and drive home. Well, all that definitely took longer than I wanted, but I'll call it a success because the oil pan came off and the new one was installed without issue. The rest of the work I'll do right here in my parents' driveway. I'm sure they love that. So I might as well remove the computer, but before I do that, I guess you have to delete all of the learned data. So here I am connecting this little device that Trust had sent me, and there were some poorly written instructions on how to do this, so it was a little bit daunting. But this is my other car, which is an old Z, and I'm just here showing that it comes with a temperature gauge, as any sensible car would. But I don't believe any variant of the Jimny does. You basically get engine cold and then engine too hot. So don't like that. Anyway, that's what you saw was plugged into the OBD. Pulled that out, plugged this in, and I think I successfully deleted all the data. Now I can send it back to Trust. Again, some of these instructions are not written specifically for the Nomad, but you figure it's the same K15B engine, so I really don't see any issue, hopefully. Now, I don't know if this is common across all the Jimnys, but in all of my previous cars, the ECU was typically somewhere in the footwell area. So to me, it's kind of crazy to have it sitting out here in this hot engine bay, but hey, if it works, it works. Probably should have disconnected this negative terminal sooner, but I'm just an amateur over here. I taped up the connectors to protect them, and I'm just going to loosen up this ECU, remove it, and ship it out by morning. At the end of the day, the sooner I get it out, the sooner they'll receive it and rewrite it and send it back to me. Absolutely exhausted after a long first day, but here I am just rereading the instructions. Luckily, I'm completely fluent in Japanese and I read Japanese written at any level, the exception being anything written by TRUST. These instructions were atrocious. Figured I would just go ahead and pre-assemble anything I can whilst in the comfort of my own home while my shop boss observes and supervises closely. Much of this was pretty mundane stuff, finding the right size bolts and washers and trying to make sense of the instruction manual and kind of assembling stud bolts or oil spouts. Came with some torque specs as well, which I may or may not have loosely followed. But yeah, things are starting to take shape here. Looking good. I went on to assemble the blow-off valve to the pressure pipe just so I don't have to do this outside while standing or hunched over the engine bay. The blow-off valve itself is quite the simple device. This poppet opens up and releases any pressurized air, which no longer has a free outlet to the combustion chamber, you know, when you come off the throttle and such. This one happens to be adjustable by this dial on top. I left it on the lowest or most easily open setting, which in my eyes seems to make sense to be the least risk setting. I don't know, but here it is all complete. Okay, it's a brand new day. I'm hoping to get to more of the fun, real meat of the work here while checking over my work from the previous day. Here is the K15 Bravo engine in all of its naturally aspirated lackluster glory. Here is the other end of the oil return tube that I just kind of capped off. The other end obviously is connected to the oil pan now. I'll get around to removing the exhaust manifold and O2 sensor for transferal to the new. And I'll also need to get down here, check for any leaks, as well as remove the oil pressure switch here and install the three-way, which will then become the source of fresh oil to the turbine. And then hopefully get around to this secondary cat down here, remove it from this joint to the front pipe or down pipe. But first things first, start up here, remove this ginormous washer tank. I mean, what are you going to do, wash the entire car with this thing? To make way and free up space for the intercooler and pipes. And the oil cooler will mount down here. Well, this is June in Tokyo, typically a very hot and humid and wet, rainy time of year. The delivery man came. My mom is from a beautiful beach town area in Izu called Shimoda, and I guess they needed this robotic lawnmower to take care of our orchard out there. Please visit if you ever come to Japan. It's absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, dumped out all of the washer fluid, of which I used absolutely none of, and here I am just transferring over the electronic pumps. There are 3 of them total, 2 for the front and rear windscreens and 1 for the front headlight washer nozzles. And you can see that slimmed it down quite a bit, opened up a bunch of space for the turbine and air cleaner and pipes. Now onto the exhaust manifold, or so I thought. I think they must have had Iron Man torque these babies down. My mom kindly drove me out in her little 5-speed K-truck to a nearby store to pick up a breaker bar because I just have this little 3/8 inch drive ratchet and I didn't want to risk breaking it, so this was an extra little cost. But man, this thing feels a world better, very little play, and just a solid feel. Probably needed to buy one anyway, so this was just a good excuse. Whoops, looks like I left a Japanese caption in there. I'm not even going to bother changing it. Breaker bars are called spinners. Spinna here in Japanese, I guess. There you go. There's your Japanese word of the day. I'm just working my way from outside in, and once I had this thing loose enough, I crawled underneath the car. Luckily the Jimny's high up enough that I can just crawl right underneath it. Basically I need to loosen this joint up and free up the downpipe. Well, as you saw, after much fun, the whole piece is out. I'm now ready to transfer the oxygen sensor over to the new cat and also check the stud bolts that were pre-installed to the headers and turbo, as well as on the head side. There were a few locations per the directions that I had to change over to studs, so make sure these are not loose, and then go ahead and introduce the exhaust manifold gasket, which seems to be a 3-leaf stainless construction, and then bolt down the brand new headers. I typically like to work from the center outward whenever torquing down anything, especially when there's a gasket involved, so I'm just doing that. And then I'm just going to place this triangular gasket here on top of this opening. And right on top, we'll just plop this turbo assembly, and boom, just like that, folks, we are turbocharged. Well, that was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, in reality, I feel like we're not even halfway through. Everything up here on the exhaust side looks good. Just got to get this new ball flange on the bottom side of the front pipe and get her connected back up. Now, with these, I've found that the slower you go and the more even you go left to right, back and forth, the better seal you get. So here's how everything looks from below once it's all buttoned up and pretty. Please, folks, do not sell photos of my feet, thank you. Well, time really flies when you're doing this kind of stuff. I feel like I started early enough in the morning, but it's already late afternoon. Luckily, we have sunlight till about 7 p.m. these days. But before we finish for the day, I'm going to go ahead and drain this brand new oil and let that drain overnight so that the engine is nice and empty for our oil-related work tomorrow. Managed a much cleaner drop this time around, and with 10 whole minutes of runtime on this oil, I guess we'll just have to write it off as a flush out. Right, another brand new day, and hopefully the last. These low-res images are burning my eyes, and this clearly was not my most favorite part of the work, but it was relatively easy. Sometimes tricky to get some of these washers and hardware in these tight confined spaces, but luckily everything kind of went in and lined up perfectly on the first try, so fairly easy stuff. Got the in and out lines connected as well, with the opposite ends just dangling free for the moment, as I still need to get the block installed. Well, that's somewhat annoying that the wrench that I had bought for the OEM filter does not fit the TRUST one, so I ran to the store after this. I went ahead and knocked out the oil pressure switch here. This is the 3-way union that I was talking about. Basically sends oil to the turbine and also feeds this switch. So make sure you put enough of this liquid thread gasket before you tighten it down. This was kind of tough. I had to use an adjustable here and go very slowly. Anyway, with the oil related stuff now out of the way, it's time to move on to the intake side of things and the intercooler, air filter, all that. This is the return hose that I will not be installing just yet. It is for return of blown off gases back to your intake. This is the original straight pressure pipe that came with the turbo kit itself, but this other pipe came with a blow-off kit which has the port for the blow-off valve welded directly to it. This side over here was not very difficult at all. Tons of space, not a whole lot to do, so knock that out real quick. Gonna have to reuse this hosing here. But anyway, I was down here under the car doing this and I couldn't really film it, but this is what it looks like. The block is in place and basically you have this hollow bolt that holds it in place. Also, it passes the oil through the assembly and through the filter for circulation. Kind of had to use an adjustable for all of this stuff. I don't own sockets this large, so keep that in mind. Well, the rain finally showed up, but after all said and done, here's how the intake side of things ended up looking, with the blow-off valve pointing toward the front of the vehicle, and took care of the vacuum tubes as well. Sort of spliced in with the original one using this 3-way junction here. Pressure pipes and front mount intercooler also installed. This intercooler was low-key kind of a tough part of the job, getting washers, nuts, and bolts in very tight confined spaces with these large clumsy hands. But anyway, everything is looking pretty, tightened down, and we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Kind of sad. But no, not really. I'm ready to be finished. And before we call it a day, just going to swap out the original plugs with these Greddy cold plugs. Very easy stuff. A few days later. That was my best SpongeBob cutscene impression, but look what came in the mail. It's my ECU, and it came back with a sticker on. Nice. I need to reconnect it and put everything back, but this is when it hit me. Well, after all, nothing is free. It came back with these instructions that look kind of important, so I gave it a look-see. Apparently, whenever you run this remapped ECU, you disconnect the original map sensor and just run it like that. Go figure. Now all we have left to do is to fill the engine with fresh oil. Mind you, this K15B will now take more than 3 liters. I think the oil cooler up here will hold a bunch of oil in it, so keep that in mind. So after 10 days of sitting in this driveway, will this engine start right up or will it blow up in my face? It's the moment of truth, folks. Oh look, the timing chain. Wow. All I can say is wow. My Jimny went from freaking slow to a little less freaking slow. And that's a win in my book, okay? I guess, in the very least, it sounded pretty awesome, so let's go with that. Now we're back in the shop for one last hurrah to put everything back. Well, there's nowhere to go back for some of these parts, but yeah, I got to put everything back together. I did test run the vehicle for several minutes after that, but I didn't have a camera mount, so sorry, no footage. Well, maybe I'll just hold on to these parts for a while. Decorate my nightstand with them, perhaps. But since these shrouds no longer returned to their original positions, I noticed that this gaping hole is left. And if I were to drive in the rain or something, I feel like that alternator is going to catch a lot of wetness. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. So I'm going to try and see if I can reuse this. Maybe cut it up or at least take a mold so I can 3D print something up later to help fill that gap. And this lower one, honestly, this one's got to go. I see no use for this whatsoever. But before I do any of that, I'm going to take a quick look around and check my work. At the end of the day, I'm just one amateur hobbyist guy over here doing this more for the experience than anything else. But boy, is everything clean or is everything clean? I mean, after all, this is a brand new car and basically I'm just putting brand new parts on a brand new car, so you would figure as much. But I'm very happy, no apparent leaks anywhere, no rubbing, no interference, everything looks good, buttoned up nicely. The turbine oil return back here is looking good as well. So I think I'm ready to call this a job well done. The sandwich block and oil cooler lines look perfect as well. And although I was a little bit worried about the RTV mating on the oil pan, that seems to be holding up just fine so far anyway. And everything is very, very shiny. On the exhaust side of things, again, looking good. Work our way back here to the secondary cat. Oh, and yes, how could I forget about this expense? I was told that an exhaust upgrade would be necessary to get any gains from the turbo kit. I mean, that's pretty obvious. So I made this a good excuse to slap on this Showa Garage, co-produced by exhaust powerhouse Gojigen, because this was the most quiet product and I didn't want anything overly loud and obnoxious. Okay, let's finish up and go home. Here's that upper shroud again. Basically, I chopped it in half and here I am cutting it semi-haphazardly. Basically, the goal was to get it to fit and fasten down strong enough to where I can fill that gap. And if it turned out ugly, I would just 3D print something nicer. And guess what? It turned out ugly. But am I going to fix it? Am I going to redo it? Probably not. Because this is going to work. And after some test runs, it doesn't rattle, it doesn't make any noise, it's just fine. So, and guess what? I bet you if I throw that grill on, you won't even be able to tell. So, there it is. Doesn't look too bad, right? So once you get your bumper close, make sure you reconnect your nozzles and fog lamps and test everything out, okay? Well, don't get too close. And finally, the real last step. letting the entire world know as you drive along the roads that you've wasted a whole bunch of money. Well, there you have it, folks. We are full circle back to the first scene. I can assure you that this upgrade was well worth it, especially for me because I was doing it more for the experience. But in terms of return on investment, well, let's talk about that. I mentioned I bought this Jimny brand new, and I won't be including this in the total cost, but for reference, set me back $20K. Shut up and take my money. $2,500 in BS options. And of course, the bulk of the cost for this upgrade was in this turbo kit, which includes everything you see in the photo there, and all of the supporting actors like the blow-off kit, oil cooler, oil pan, washer tank, oil filter and spark plugs, and don't you forget the ECU remap alone set you back 150,000 Japanese yen. All said, comes out to a shop chief jaw-dropping $5,800 US. Turns out I could have bought this used cappuccino for that kind of money. Well, there you have it, folks. If you've made it this far, you are one sick individual, just like I. But thanks for watching. I hope this was in some way educational or mildly entertaining to you. I do have some other junk on the horizon if I can just be bothered to edit the videos. Basically all the work I've done to this point in the few months I've owned the car, like changing out all the fluids, installing a boost gauge, building it into this instrument panel thing by using a 3D printer, working with my shop chief and designing all that stuff, replacing speakers, suspension, deadening door cards, all that fun stuff. Also intend to eventually post some stuff that I've done on my 83 Datsun or Fairlady Z and the Audi A4 as well. That thing can be sometimes fun to work on, sometimes not. But in the meantime, be well. Maybe if you're bored you can check out this video where essentially you'll watch this all over again except all in Japanese. Bye!